Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every relationship, in every situationship, where you start to feel like you're doing too much. You're always available, always trying, always giving while he's just there, half in, half out. You text, he replies, but you double text and he delays. You ask to see him, and he says, maybe later. You try harder, and somehow, it still feels like you're losing him. But here's what most people don't understand. The more distant you become, not cold, not manipulative, but authentically distant, the more he begins to feel what you used to feel alone. That aching tension, that yearning. Because desire doesn't grow in constant closeness. It grows in the space between two people. It grows when he suddenly realizes you're no longer standing exactly where he left you. When you hear someone say, the more distant you become, the more he desires you, it can sound like a tactic, like a mind game. But the truth is, this principle only works when the distance comes from a place of authenticity, not manipulation. Real distance is not about pretending you're busy. It's not about deliberately ignoring his messages to create tension. It's about emotionally stepping back because your needs aren't being met. It's about choosing peace over performance. When someone starts to pull away from us, our instinct is to try harder. We double down on effort. We over-communicate. We bend further. And in doing so, we lose something critical, our center. We become so focused on winning someone back, we forget what it feels like to be valued without having to beg for it. But when the distance you create is rooted in truth, when you genuinely feel you've overextended yourself and you choose to redirect that energy toward yourself, it does something powerful. It changes the dynamic because people feel that energy shift. And men, especially, are often more alert to what they might lose than to what they already have. You become valuable not because you are distant, but because your distance signals that your time and your heart are not on the clearance rack. They are not to be taken lightly. When you're constantly available, emotionally and physically, it can create a false sense of permanence. He starts to assume you'll always be there, that he doesn't have to try, that your presence is a given. But when you create space, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, he begins to feel the weight of your absence. That weight is what triggers desire, not because you're trying to provoke it, but because for the first time he's faced with a version of you that is no longer driven by his inconsistency. He sees that you're not waiting in the same place he left you, and that unsettles him. There's something magnetic about a woman who isn't trying to be wanted. She radiates a kind of quiet confidence that's far more powerful than any performance. She doesn't chase. She doesn't over-explain. She lets her silence speak for her, and that silence, when it comes from a woman who used to give everything, is deafening. It forces a man to evaluate what he's losing, and often, that's when he starts to desire her most. But again, this only works when the distance is real, when it's not a ploy, but a shift in values, a shift in standards. When you stop needing his attention to feel enough, that's when he starts to see your worth. Because you're no longer fighting for a place in his world, you're building a world of your own. And if he wants to be in it, he'll have to rise to meet you there. When you're constantly available to someone, emotionally, physically, mentally, they start to take that availability for granted. It's not always intentional or malicious. It's simply human nature. The more access we have to something, the less conscious we become of its value. When you're always the first to respond, always the one to initiate, always ready to show up, it creates a rhythm where he never has to question your presence. He never has to earn it. And over time, that presence becomes background noise, comforting maybe, but no longer urgent or exciting. This is where emotional laziness begins. He stops putting in effort because he doesn't feel he has to. You're there. You're invested. You're consistent. And while those are all beautiful qualities in a healthy relationship, when they're one-sided, they start to work against you. Your consistency begins to replace his effort. Your emotional labor becomes the glue holding everything together. And he learns, without ever saying it out loud, that you'll do the work for the both of you. But desire doesn't grow in that dynamic. It needs tension. it needs polarity. When someone always knows where you are, what you're doing, how you feel about them, there's no mystery left to uncover, no room for him to lean in, to wonder, to choose you actively. And when there's nothing left for him to pursue, he begins to settle into emotional autopilot. He may not pull away entirely, but he'll become reactive instead of proactive. He'll respond but won't reach. He'll reply but won't initiate. He'll enjoy your energy but won't offer his own in return. This doesn't mean you should withhold affection or play hard to get. It means you should be mindful of what your availability is teaching him. Every time you overextend, you're teaching him that he doesn't have to. Every time you stay, no matter how little he gives, you reinforce the idea that your love comes without standards. And people, especially men who are unsure of what they want, rarely value what they don't have to work for. Emotional laziness isn't about a man being bad. It's about a man becoming comfortable. Too comfortable. Comfortable enough to stop trying, to stop growing, to stop showing up with the same passion and curiosity he once had. And you, by constantly being present, may be unintentionally enabling it. Not because you're weak, but because you're loving from a place of fear. Fear that if you stop showing up first, he won't show up at all. And that fear traps you in a cycle of overgiving while he quietly slips into responding. But the moment you create space, the moment you stop filling every gap, answering every text instantly, offering every piece of your energy without pause, you interrupt the pattern. You shift the dynamic. He starts to notice your absence. He starts to feel the weight of having to do something to keep your connection alive. And that small shift can wake him up. It can snap him out of emotional laziness and into conscious effort. Not because you're manipulating him, but because you're stepping out of a role that was never yours to carry alone. You are not here to be his emotional cushion. You are not here to be a constant presence that requires no reciprocation. You are here to be met with the same energy you give. When you stop giving it all away too freely, you give him the opportunity to rise up and meet you, or fall away and reveal he was never meant to stay. Sometimes your presence doesn't wake someone up. No matter how much love, support, or affection you give, it doesn't land the way you hope it will. You're doing everything right, showing up, communicating, trying to be understood, but it's like talking to a wall. He doesn't change. He doesn't step up. He doesn't seem to notice the weight you carry. But the second you go quiet, the second you stop trying, suddenly you're heard. Because your absence speaks in a language that your words never could. It's not about giving someone the silent treatment. It's about realizing that there's nothing left to say, that you've expressed yourself over and over, and still nothing shifted. So now, instead of using your voice to fight for someone who doesn't fight for you, you choose stillness. And that stillness becomes thunder in his world. Men don't always respond to your words, especially if they've grown used to tuning them out, especially if they know you'll be there regardless. But when you fall silent, when you don't call, when you don't react, when you stop making sure he knows how much you care, that's when he starts to feel it. The emptiness where your energy used to be, the space where your love used to land, the sudden realization that your presence wasn't guaranteed. That's when he notices. Because people rarely notice water when it's flowing. They notice it when the well runs dry. When your attention disappears, when your affection is no longer freely offered, when your energy is reclaimed, suddenly, he's left with the echo of everything he took for granted. And that echo is loud. Louder than all your explanations. Louder than all your tears. Louder than all the nights you stayed, hoping he'd finally see you. He might not have listened to your needs, but now he feels their absence. It's in the quiet moments, when you don't text back right away, when you don't initiate plans, when you're not waiting on his every word, that he begins to understand the impact you had. He realizes that what he assumed was permanent was actually a choice you made daily, a choice to show up, a choice to give, a choice to love. And now that you've pulled back, he has to confront what it really meant. There's a strange power in withdrawal, not as a weapon, but as a boundary. When you stop over explaining your worth and start letting your absence carry the message, it hits differently. You're no longer proving yourself. You're no longer auditioning for affection. You're simply stepping away, and that simple act shifts everything. He's left wondering what changed, wondering why your energy feels different, wondering if someone else has your attention now, and that wondering creates desire, not because you're playing hard to get, but because you've finally stopped being so easy to overlook. Silence has a way of reflecting the truth louder than any confrontation ever could. When someone stops hearing from you, they're forced to ask themselves, did I lose her? Did I waste her effort? Was she always this quiet, or did I push her into it? That's when they realize they had something meaningful. Sometimes, it's not until you go quiet that someone hears you for the very first time. Pulling back isn't about revenge. It's not about making someone feel what you felt or punishing them for not showing up the way you needed. It's about reclaiming your power, especially when you've spent too long giving it away in small, unnoticed pieces. When you emotionally pull back, you're doing something profoundly healing. You're reminding yourself that you don't need to be chosen by someone else to feel worthy. You're choosing you. It's easy to get caught in a loop of proving your value to someone who isn't ready to see it. You give more, hoping it'll be the thing that finally wakes them up. You lower your standards, thinking maybe they'll grow into who you believe they could be. You put your needs second, believing love requires sacrifice, but eventually you reach a point where the cost of being available outweighs the comfort of being needed. Pulling back is the moment you stop begging for scraps and start serving yourself a full plate. It's the decision to give your energy to someone who's shown up for you every single day, you. Because the more we chase someone else's validation, the more we lose touch with our own. And the truth is, nobody can make you feel truly loved, appreciated, or chosen if you don't believe you're worthy of those things without them. When you pull back, you're not just creating space in a relationship. You're creating space inside yourself, space to reflect, space to reconnect with your boundaries, space to remind yourself of what you deserve. That space is sacred. It's where clarity is born, and from that clarity, self-respect rises. A man notices when a woman stops overreaching, not because she's punishing him, but because the energy shifts. Suddenly, she's no longer filling the silence with check in texts. She's no longer rearranging her life to fit into his inconsistency. She's no longer auditioning for a role in a story she doesn't even feel safe in. And that shift doesn't just change his experience, it transforms hers. She starts to feel powerful again. Because every time she doesn't reach out first, she's telling herself, I trust that I'm enough without needing to chase. Every time she chooses herself instead of waiting for him to choose her, she reinforces her own value. And that self-respect becomes magnetic. It shows in her tone. It shows in her energy. It shows in the way she walks, in the way she no longer waits for breadcrumbs. The moment you stop giving so much of your emotional energy to someone who hasn't earned it, you come back into balance. You stop overextending. You stop controlling outcomes. You start letting people reveal themselves, who will show up and who will let you go. That's not weakness. That's strength. And that strength, that grounded confidence, becomes a quiet signal to the world around you. I know what I bring. I know what I deserve. And I will not overgive just to feel seen. When you pull back for the right reasons, the right people start to lean in. Not because you played a game, but because you finally stopped playing one. You stopped managing someone else's emotions and started honoring your own. And in doing so, you made it clear that your love is not something to be taken lightly. It is something to be earned, cherished, and reciprocated. When a woman becomes less predictable, when she lives her life with intention and doesn't bend to meet every demand, something remarkable happens. A man begins to see her not as an accessory he owns, but as a person with depth, mystery, and value. Predictability can feel safe, but it can also feel owned. When someone knows exactly how you'll respond, what you'll say, and where you'll be, they lose the spark of curiosity that fuels genuine desire. It's the unknown, The variables, the possibility that she might choose something else or go somewhere unexpected that ignites a man's interest. Distance in this context isn't about playing games for the sake of manipulation, it's about honoring your own rhythms and priorities. When you cultivate your own world, your friendships, your hobbies, your goals, and you don't drop everything the second he texts, you're sending a powerful message. Your life is rich and full, and you are not waiting for someone else to give it meaning. That independence creates a magnetic pull, because it's a living demonstration of self-worth. A man who sees that you are not easily tamed or owned will suddenly recognize that earning a place in your life requires effort, respect, and sincere intention. Moreover, unpredictability allows a man to clarify his feelings. When there's a little mystery, he has to pay attention. He notices the subtle changes in your schedule or your tone and starts to wonder what's behind them. If you're out achieving a personal victory, he wants to share in that joy. If you're quiet because you're recharging, he realizes he misses your energy. This back and forth of presence and absence keeps him engaged. It forces him to be present in the moment rather than drifting on autopilot. Possession, on the other hand, breeds complacency. If a man feels he already has you, he may stop making the small gestures, the thoughtful text, the compliments, the phone call just to say he's thinking of you. But if he senses you're not guaranteed, that you might choose differently or prioritize yourself, he steps up, he courts you, he listens to you. He learns to appreciate the nuances of who you are, because every interaction becomes an opportunity to prove his interest and his understanding. True value is never passive. It's revealed in the way a person chooses their own path and invites someone else into it, rather than following someone else's lead. When you live by your own schedule, your own standards, and your own vision, a man sees your life as something to be invited into, not taken for granted. That shift, from being a given to being a choice, reinforces his respect for you. It clarifies that you are not an object to be possessed, but a partner to be pursued, and in that pursuit, his desire grows stronger with each step he must take. Not chasing someone doesn't mean you're rejecting them. It doesn't mean you're cold, closed off, or no longer interested. It means you've chosen self-respect over self-sacrifice. There's a difference between being open to love and making yourself emotionally dependent on someone else's attention. When you stop chasing, you're not pushing them away. You're pulling yourself back into alignment with your own worth. Chasing often comes from a place of fear. Fear of losing them. Fear of being forgotten. Fear that if you don't make the effort, the connection will die. But here's the truth. If the connection can't survive without you constantly probing yourself, constantly reaching out, constantly bending, it's not a connection built on mutual effort. It's built on imbalance. And anything built that way eventually collapses under its own weight. When you choose not to chase, you're saying, I will not keep knocking on a door that refuses to open. You're saying, if you want me in your life, you'll show me with your actions, not just your words. That's not bitterness. That's not ego. That's self-respect. It's easy to fall into the trap of over-giving, especially when you care deeply, when you see the potential in someone, or when you're trying to revive something that once felt beautiful. But chasing love often means abandoning yourself. You start to mold yourself into what you think they want. You excuse behaviors that hurt you. You silence your needs just to avoid pushing them further away. And in doing so, you slowly disappear from your own life. But when you stop chasing, you begin to show up for yourself again. You begin to listen to the part of you that knows you deserve more than half effort. You reconnect with your boundaries. You take your power back, not in anger, but in clarity. A man who truly values you won't require you to chase. He won't let the connection rest entirely on your effort. He'll meet you halfway. He'll call. He'll ask. He'll show up. Because when someone sees your worth clearly, they won't gamble with it. And if your silence, your stillness, or your decision to stop reaching out causes him to fade away, that was never love. That was convenience. Not chasing teaches you to value peace over performance. You stop asking, what can I do to make him stay? And you start asking, what does it cost me to keep trying this hard? And when the cost is your self-worth, your energy, your joy, you know it's too high. There's a quiet strength in walking away from anything that doesn't grow you. There's dignity in choosing your own emotional well-being over the constant anxiety of waiting for someone to care the way you do. And the irony is, the moment you stop needing them to choose you is often the moment they finally see your value. But even if they don't, you've won. Because you didn't chase. You didn't beg. You didn't shrink yourself to fit into a space that didn't honor you. You stood still. You let them go if they needed to. And you trusted that the love meant for you wouldn't require a chase. It would meet you where you are, whole, strong, and finally at peace. The right man doesn't need constant reminders of your value because he sees it clearly from the beginning. He doesn't have to be convinced. He doesn't need you to prove your worth through effort, sacrifice, or unending availability. He recognizes your presence as something special, not something ordinary. And when a woman is grounded, when she's emotionally balanced, secure in who she is, and not trying to be everything for everyone, she radiates a kind of energy that cannot be faked. That energy speaks for itself, and the right man listens. You don't need to explain, overextend, or overcompensate. The right man pays attention. He sees the little things, the way you carry yourself, the way you handle silence, the way you respond to conflict without losing yourself. He notices the way you respect your own boundaries, the way you speak about your life, the way you prioritize your peace. These things don't require performance. They just require presence. When a woman becomes grounded and a little less available, not out of spite but out of purpose, something changes. She no longer operates from the need to be validated. Her actions are intentional, not reactive. She knows that her time and energy are limited, and she becomes careful about where she places them. That selectiveness doesn't push the right man away. It pulls him in. Because the right man doesn't want someone who is desperate to be loved. He wants someone who knows she is lovable without needing to prove it. There's nothing more attractive than someone who has options but still chooses to be present. And there's nothing more powerful than a woman who is emotionally independent, who isn't afraid to walk away if the treatment doesn't align with her standards. That's not detachment, it's maturity. That's not coldness, it's clarity. Many women fall into the trap of believing they need to do more to be seen. They try harder, become more available, more understanding, more forgiving. But in reality, the more they try to prove their worth, the more it looks like they don't believe in it themselves. The right man doesn't need all that effort. In fact, too much effort can backfire. It makes him complacent. It makes him think your love is guaranteed, even if he's giving very little in return. But when you're grounded, when you hold your space with quiet strength, he notices that your love is a privilege, not a guarantee. That he has to continue showing up for you, not because you're forcing him to, but because he wants to. Your distance isn't cold, it's dignified. Your calmness isn't indifference, it's confidence. The right man values a woman who has her own life, who is not easily swayed, who doesn't crumble under uncertainty. He admires her restraint, her standards, and the way she doesn't tolerate half-hearted affection. He respects her enough to rise to her level instead of asking her to lower herself to meet his comfort zone. When you stop broadcasting your value and start simply being valuable, living it, walking it, believing it, you create a dynamic where he must choose to keep up or step aside. And if he's the right man, he'll not only keep up, he'll never stop appreciating what he's found in you. Because he sees you clearly, not as a woman who needs to be won over, but as one who already knows she's enough. Distance has a way of revealing the truth that closeness often hides. When you step back, not to test someone, but to protect your peace, you give the other person the space to show who they really are. If someone only desires you when you're pulling away, that's not love. That's a reaction. And reactions reveal things we often miss when we're too emotionally invested. When you create distance, you strip away the convenience. You remove the constant availability, the safety net, the emotional comfort they may have taken for granted. Suddenly, they have to confront their own feelings, without your reassurance, without your presence doing the work for them. And in that space, one of two things happens. Either they realize how deeply they care and step forward with real intention, or they stay silent, revealing that their interest was always temporary. Distance doesn't create feelings. It reveals them. It shows you what's real and what was only there because it was easy. When someone moves closer as you move away, not out of panic, but out of clarity, that tells you they're truly invested. But if they only chase because they feel the loss, only to disappear again once they get your attention, that's not desire, it's ego. You're not distancing yourself to manipulate anyone. You're doing it to protect your energy and observe clearly. Because sometimes the only way to know what someone truly feels is to step back far enough to let them show you. Without your influence, without your effort, without your constant presence, that's when their real intentions rise to the surface. Remember this, the distance you create isn't a punishment, it's a declaration.